We are going to dive into that readiness feature today, kind of, what Volt's kind of rationale was behind it, how it can be useful, how it can be implemented, and really what you can do with that information, how to apply that and make some changes. Little brief intro about myself. I've been a strength and conditioning specialist and fitness professional for about 12 years now. Did my interning at the collegiate level, but I've worked predominantly at the high school level as a strength and conditioning coach and PE teacher. I was at a school in Los Angeles called Harvard Westlake School. I was at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, and most recently was a PE chair and head of performance at Ransom Everglades School in Miami. So I am calling in from Miami this afternoon. It is a brisk 82 degrees today. Don't mean to rub that in to all you cold folks, but it's a pleasure to be here. It's good to meet you. That's just a little bit of background as to where my experience is coming from, kind of what my lens has been. Okay, so we can dive in here as to kind of the evolution of the coach role. I think that's really where all of this has stemmed from. If we look at the past couple of years, really what has evolved from a coaching standpoint is how we look at the athlete, how we treat the athlete, and how we monitor the athlete. Like these weren't really things that we were asked to do several years ago. The sports industry, right, is really shaping the coach role to have more of this like holistic approach to athlete development and athlete management. We're no longer just looking at skill development and physical readiness and physical well-being, right? We're being asked to assess the entire athlete, physical, mental, emotional. And this boom, right? We've seen it in the media. There's been a huge emphasis from our professional athletes around the world. They're really, really trying to make the rest of the world aware of this mental health piece. And it doesn't just apply to professional athletes and people in the limelight. It really does trickle down to our high school and collegiate athletes and first responders. And I think we would all agree that this is a positive thing, right? This awareness piece is certainly a positive thing, but it can be kind of tricky in how you manage it and how you go about it. You as a coach or a coordinator, you have a lot of other responsibilities and a lot of other duties. And now you're being asked to, assess this wellness piece of your athletes as well. So I think Volt did a great job at creating this readiness check-in tool to help you manage this wellness piece and monitor your athlete's well-being. And I do think it's also a great tool for the athlete to become a little bit more self-aware, or the first responder to become a little bit more self-aware of how they're feeling in that moment. So maybe you've seen this, right? This is the 5 questions that they are prompted with before every workout. They're going to be asked how sore they are, how stressed they are, their energy levels, their mood, and their sleep. And they're going to be asked to rate this on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being the worst they could possibly feel for that particular category. That's the most negative response they can have. And then 5 being the most positive response they can have for that category. It's the best they could possibly feel. And I do think there is some intentionality behind having this at the beginning of a workout. The athlete or the user is going into this, this activity, this workout. They're already in a mental space of they're going to go do something. They're focused. And I think that brings some sort of consistency and accuracy to kind of when they're assessing how they feel. If this was totally random, and you can chime in here and shoot your opinion out, but I feel like when these wellness check-ins become random, or they're just prompted, like just get it done whenever you can. Sometimes they're just like, if you're laying in bed, you're not really, you're feeling what you feel in bed in that moment. And that you could be really tired. It's just not going to be as accurate as really in totality, kind of how you're feeling. If it's after the workout, it's going to be super skewed, right? Your energy levels might be affected both positively or negatively. Your mood could be affected. So I do think there is really strong benefits to having this before the workout, just from a place that they are mentally going into that, and just from a consistency standpoint. This tool is really only effective if the user is being as honest as possible, right? Honesty is the best policy here. it's really important for you to educate the users and the athletes on the honesty aspect of this. Coaches in the high school setting and collegiate setting have to kind of worry about athletes wanting to manipulate the scores a little bit here. This is a great piece to kind of educate the users on the importance of accurately filling this out, because you are going to do something with this, I hope, and you are going to follow up with them. You are going to make those adjustments, and they need to know that this is in their best interest, and you have their best interest at the forefront of what you're doing. So in order for you to make this effective, they also need to be honest in how they're representing how they feel. I would suggest if you're able to and you have the visibility to do this, right? I think the most effective way is if you're supervising the workout or have oversight of these athletes or users going into the weight room, stop and make them all fill this out simultaneously. Like make it a designated 2 minutes really is all they need at the most to fill this out, and designate the 2 minutes in silence, and they're not next to each other. It should be a time really for them to focus and not chatter, not ask the person next to them what they're filling out for soreness, what they're putting for mood, and force them to use that full 2 minutes or 3, whatever you feel is necessary for them to fill this out. Because a lot of the times, we see that it says click, 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 hurry, I want to get to my workout. And there's not really much thought behind it. And this is intended to be thought provoking. So if you give them a couple minutes of designated time in silence, no communication, and they can take 30 seconds or they can take the full 120, they're not, you're not going to stop that window until the 2 minutes is up, and then everybody can start their workout. And I think this will bring a little bit more accuracy to the individuals. And it shouldn't be a group activity, right? This is a very individualized questionnaire. And the last thing I'll say about this is, wellness in general is, right, it's pretty subjective. It's a pretty subjective and relative thing to the individuals and to the athletes. So Volt does a great job of making this more objective by adding a score to it, right? It's really hard to evaluate subjectivity and the subjectiveness of wellness. And this is a great way to make it as objective as possible because it is relative to the individuals. So let's take a peek at V3. Hopefully you all have seen V3 and the new dashboard. So right, they fill out their surveys, they click done. Now where does all this information go? Goes to you. You have now the oversight of what those scores were reported. So looking at this dashboard, you've got your readiness graph here. And this is going to display the team or everybody who has filled it out. It's going to display the average here, right? So we saw 5 is the best they could possibly feel. That means 5 is the highest rating they could possibly have, or the highest average score they could possibly have. With that said, near impossible, you're probably never going to see a 5 listed up here. That would be kind of weird, actually. I would be more concerned if I saw a 5 up here. To me, that means people aren't taking it seriously. It's going to be pretty much impossible to say that everybody on your team is 5s across the board all the time. It's not going to be a thing. So don't shoot for 5, but shoot close to 5, and know that sometimes it may dip down, and that's okay. But we want to err on the side of closer to 5, just knowing that 5 is probably not a realistic expectation to see. So here we are looking at this graph. We've got all these categories displayed. I can see when people have had their workouts, right? So this group worked out on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I can hover over each of these points to look a little bit deeper into the specific categories. I can see how many people have answered the question and what the average score was for a specific category. I do want to make note here that looking at this graph, okay, there are some categories here that are a little counterintuitive when you're looking at the graph. And those two would be stress and soreness. So I can filter down here too. I can take away, I can look at however much I want to look at on this graph. So when I'm looking at stress and soreness, it is intuitive for us visually to say, okay, stress is spiking. That must mean stress is high, right? There's a high stress rating, can easily be mistaken for the athlete is very stressed. Well, actually, it's the opposite, right? We're looking at this as more like a stress resilience. The athlete is more stress resilient when it's higher up. They're less stressed. Same thing with soreness. When we see a spike in soreness, it's very intuitive for us to go, ooh, soreness is high today, right? Because that's what it looks like on the graph. But in theory, that means, their soreness is actually relatively low. They're not feeling as sore, right? So when you see the spikes, that's always a positive correlation to that category and that feeling. When we want to be more concerned is when that downward trend starts to occur and we're down at the lower end of that graph. So just keep an eye on that. It's quick to assume that high stress rating means high stress, but that's not the case here. Another awesome piece of this dashboard is, let's say you've kind of got your eye on somebody, an athlete or a user that you kind of have seen their behaviors are a little abnormal. You're not really sure. This is another option where we can filter down further. And I can look at an individual athlete's readiness data. Okay, so if I go to search members and I search one of my athletes, I can now pull up just their data on the graph. Okay, so I have a very specific view as to how this athlete was feeling this week. In this case, looking at this graph right away, it's very sporadic, right? It's catching my eye automatically. What's going on here? How is your stress so good, but your sleep so bad? And then how can you go from such a bad night's sleep to such a good night's sleep? So maybe my intuition about this athlete was correct, right? Because that's kind of what we're using this for, is my assumptions, my intuition matching to what the athlete is actually reporting. And so in this case, I may go to this athlete and say, okay, Wednesday you had such an awesome night's sleep. How did we achieve that? Let's figure out, what did you do to achieve that really good night's sleep? And let's try to harness whatever you did and let's try to replicate that every time. Because whatever you did on Monday and Tuesday wasn't working. You didn't get a good night's sleep. So let's not do what you did on Monday, Tuesday, and let's do more of what you did on Wednesday, so we can kind of achieve that better sleep score. Same thing with stress, right? They weren't feeling very stressed. Let's see if we can harness why they were feeling that way on Monday and Tuesday and get them to tap into maybe something that they did that could have shifted that sort of stress rating. Another option here on the dashboard, just another visual. I can come down and click any of the completed workouts, and I can also view their readiness score here. Okay, if I just wanted to look at it a little bit differently, I can come here and take a peek at their readiness scores. Okay, so looking at this graph, all right, these scores can have predictive behaviors. If you're accustomed to a very cyclical calendar year of same occurring events, if you are accustomed to an academic calendar, or the natural ebbs and flows of the school year, maybe you're operating off of holidays or seasons, you can sort of predict what's going to happen here. You can predict based on your training blocks too, right? There are certain times of year where you should see soreness is going to be higher. There should be times of year where stress might be a little bit more elevated. Coming off of a vacation, or if someone's on vacation, right, and they're working out, their stress might be lower. Athletes coming back from summer break may report more soreness as their workouts start ramping up a bit. So you can predict, and same thing as like I was saying with the individual, your intuition is probably correct, and you can take this and match what you assume should be going on with, is this what the athletes are reporting? Where this really becomes important is when the predictive behaviors become a little bit less predictive or become a little bit more random throughout the year, right? If you're anticipating that soreness should not be an issue and stress should be relatively low, and athletes are reporting higher on these categories, that may be an indication we got to kind of check in on what's going on here. So really use this tool to compare and contrast with what you're assuming the athlete should be feeling, and then as to what is actually being reported. This feature is a great tool to understand how each of your athletes is responding to either a training stimulus, a certain time of year, a training block, This is a great way to see how they are reacting to that. And it is very important to note that even though, you know, your athletes or your users might be on the same sleep schedule, they might be on the same practice schedule, they may be doing the same exact drills, the same exact hour of the day, they might be doing the same exact workout. But what's happening is, even though they have the same stimulus, they're not all responding the same to that stimulus. And that's because of a whole lot of other factors that are going on, right? You as the coach can control the practice schedule and the lifts and things like that. But what you can't control are all these external factors that are going on in their lives, right? These are people outside of athletes, high school kids, college kids, they're a mess. And we forget that because it's been so long since we've been there, but we forget there's so much pressure in the classroom, on the field, and a lot of that is self-inflicted. There's a lot of unknown and scary world out there. You know, they're going to college and they're going to the real world. There's a lot of anticipation, a lot of anxiety, and that can all compile and be affecting what's going on this readiness chart, and which correlates to their performance. In the case of first responders, you know, traumatic events, people out in the battlefield, those types of things, lack of sleep, missing your family, those are all affecting the readiness score, which ultimately is going to affect their performance or their job. And it's also going to affect their recovery process. And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into how these categories affect performance and how we can use them as indicators as to maybe why the athletes are not recovering or struggling to recover. Okay, so soreness. What the heck is it? I'm sure you've heard of the term DOMS, D-O-M-S, delayed onset muscle soreness, right? This is where when we work out, we're creating little micro tears or damage to the muscle tissues. That's what we need to do to work out. We have to break the muscle down in order to build it back up again. But when we do break the muscle tissue down, what happens is there is an accumulation of hydrogen ions, right? That is a byproduct of breaking down your muscle tissue. And that accumulation of hydrogen ions, which is acidic, is causing that sensation of feeling sore, right? It's not lactic acid. We're taking that out of our vocabulary. Lactic acid is not the reason for soreness. We have learned that it really is an accumulation of hydrogen ions that are building up. And what we're looking at, we're not really correlating soreness with performance necessarily. What we're correlating soreness is with recovery or the ability of the athlete to recover. So a couple things that, you know, we want to look for here is if soreness should be acute, right? It occurs usually 24 to 72 hours after a workout, and it should be gone within that same window of time. When soreness becomes chronic or more consistent, that's kind of an alarm going off in my head. Why is this athlete continuously and consistently reporting soreness for this long of a time? There's probably a piece missing in the puzzle somewhere in their recovery process. It might be the whole team. They may not just be getting enough days off. There's just too much stimulus at once. But there's other contributing factors that go into recovery. One being which nutrition. This is probably the weakest point in all of our athletes' careers is their nutrition. And they're probably the first to admit that. They're not eating enough. A lot will report that they don't have access to it as often as they should. A lot will report that they are just not educated in what they should be eating or how much they should be eating or when they should be eating. So this is a great sort of insert education point from a coach to teach your athletes on, you know, what is protein, how much protein should you be getting, what are carbs? Carbs are good. How many carbs do you need? What should your plate look like? And if you feel like, you know, it's getting to the point where it's a little bit over your head or a little bit over your scope of practice, you know, always default to an RD or a nutritionist for some consulting. If you have kids that, you know, could potentially be on the path to an eating disorder, it's always in your best interest to get them professional help in that specific area. Another part of nutrition is hydration. I can safely assume that every athlete is probably not drinking enough water. And a lot of that, a lot of coaches will purchase, a lot of programs will just purchase reusable water bottles for their athletes because of this. It's one of those things they're not really thinking of. And by the time they're thirsty, it's too late, right? You're already dehydrated by the time you're thirsty. So a water bottle, making sure they have a water bottle with them is a great tip. It's just a nice reminder. Oh yeah, I should probably drink some water. I should refill it, or it's still full. I need to drink water. So making sure they have reusable water bottles with them all the time is just a good reminder to get them to continue to hydrate. A couple other contributing factors to recovery on top of nutrition would be stress and sleep. And so we're gonna dive a little bit into both of those as well. Okay, so stress. How does it affect recovery? How does it affect performance? I'm first gonna say stress is unavoidable. It is inevitable. And for anyone who claims to be living a stress-free life, they're lying to you. And what they've figured out is how to manage that stress. Trying to achieve stress-free is not realistic and it's not attainable, and that's okay. Stress is good, right? We need stress to evolve and to grow, whether it's physical or mental, we need it. But what happens when we are physiologically, what happens when we're in a stressful situation, right? We get into like a dire need. I'm sure you've all heard of fight or flight. Fight or flight kicks in, and what happens physiologically is cortisol and adrenaline are released, and those are two hormones, and they're two very, very important hormones. Okay, so when we get into that stressful situation, whatever it might be, right, that situation is different for everybody. Could be right before a game, it could be you almost fell down the stairs, could be you almost got hit by a car, or whatever the case may be. Whatever stress causes you to have this fight or flight stress response, cortisol and adrenaline are released. And that's good. We want them to. This is a survival mechanism. We need that to happen. But what we don't want to happen is we don't want to be in that like fluttering state of fight or flight for a long period of time. So that's going to cause cortisol to always be released. And cortisol and adrenaline are meant to be quick, come and go. We don't want them to stay in the system for very long or for long durations of time. So what happens is when that cortisol is constantly released, it has like this trickle effect, and it can cause a lot of physiological issues. One being heart problems, could be unsolicited weight gain. It could affect other systems of the body, like our digestive system. I'm going to give you like an off the wall example here. So not that I have experience in this, but imagine you were driving home from work, or you're on your way to work, you're in your car, you're running a little late, you have to use the bathroom, and you start speeding up a little bit, you're trying to get to work, really got to use the bathroom, and you're getting a little crazy in the car, you're driving a little bit faster, a little bit more reckless, and oh my God, you almost get into a car accident. You smash the brakes, you turn the wheel, you freak out, you avoid this accident, your heart's racing, right? You feel that adrenaline, you feel that cortisol pumping through, and you're like, just avoided like a serious accident there. If something like this has ever happened to you, have you realized right after that moment, you suddenly don't have to use the bathroom anymore? It's crazy. Literally, that reaction will shut down other systems of the body. So we don't want that to happen for a long period of time. Can you imagine if your digestive system shut down for weeks on weeks? It'd be a major problem. Okay, so we have to just make sure that this bit of fight or flight is not occurring for a long period of time. The other key point here is cortisol will suppress the immune system. And when our immune system is down, we're more susceptible to illness and injury, and our recovery process is going to be super hindered there as well. So stress management is really an acquired skill. I think it's something people work on their whole life. But in this moment, if your athletes are reporting, they're in the dumps, very stressful, it's a great opportunity to pull them aside, have a conversation with them. Hey man, slow down, let go of all this worry. take a chill pill, and we all need to do this to ourselves sometimes, right? We don't need to be operating 1,000 miles an hour all day long. Like, it's okay to slow down. And this is way easier said than done. I get that. But sometimes people just need to be reminded, like, what's the worst that's going to happen if you just slow down right now? Probably nothing. Encouraging them to get a full night's sleep. Learn to say no to things, right? If you're a yes man, or you've got a kid on your team who's a yes man, so that is exhausting. Those people are exhausted. They say yes and they seem, all bubbly, but that is a really exhausting person to be as a yes man. So remind them that it's okay to say no to things, right? The world's not going to end if they say no to doing something. A support system is going to be really huge here when it comes time to stress management, right? We see that a lot. People who are suffering from mental illness, having that support system is really important in recovering through that mental illness, but just in general, right? Making sure your athletes have that support system at home or at school or wherever that is. Finding the joy in things, that sometimes it's hard for us. We go through our days and we're just kind of grinding and we're robotic and we're just doing, and we don't really see the fun and we don't laugh and things anymore. So get your team to laugh. Maybe it's a team bonding experience. Maybe it's just doing something funny, everybody being vulnerable and just trying to have a little bit more fun with our day to day. See if your athlete or your user is not a great planner. They might be super disorganized. And sometimes those people find themselves very anxious because they didn't plan properly. So help them get organized, help them plan ahead, be a little bit more diligent in getting ahead of things. And then remind them to lean into the things that they can change, right? There are certain things in our lives we have control over. Stress in general, we may not have like so much control over, but they do have the power to fix their sleep. They do have the power to fix their nutrition. They do have the control over their social network. So remind them that tap into these things that they can control. Start there. And then always ask for help, right? I think the best policy is the open door policy. If you don't already express this to your athletes, make sure you do. Make sure you tell them you have an open door policy. They can come and tell you anything. It's a safe space. Some of them don't have this at home. Some of us don't have another outlet. You might be the only one that they have. So let them know that they can ask for help. And that point goes to you too, as the coach or the person in charge. You too need to ask for help sometimes. They may put a situation on you or put something on you that you're like, oh my God, I don't feel like I can help them here. And you may find that more often than not, and that's okay. So you too need to ask for help. Outsource somebody that can help get this athlete the appropriate help and resources that they need. Okay, sleep. Sleep is so underrated and it is so underutilized as it pertains to being a performance tool and a recovery tool. I don't know why, but sleep is always like the first thing to go. People feel like it's a negotiable. I don't need sleep. I'll just stay up a little bit extra. It's fine. I'll just shave off some sleep. Sleep is not something we should be compromising or sacrificing. It's literally the only time of day that our body is in a complete state of recovery. So, find out why your athletes or your users may be reporting low sleep. It's a great time to educate and maybe help them get a better night's sleep. The research suggests that athletes who get less than 8 hours of sleep are 1.7 times at greater risk for being injured than those who get 8 or more. 1.7 times greater risk of getting injured. Tell them this. They may not know this information. It may trigger, it may trigger them to rethink or second guess, cutting out some hours of sleep. So if you are finding lots of low sleep scores on the readiness, this could be an opportunity to have a group discussion or an individual discussion on sleep habits. A lot of the time it's time management. When you're dealing with some of the younger athletes, they just don't know how to manage their time or where to allocate their time throughout the day. And then give them these tips, right? These are very simple tips on how to improve their sleep. For most people, a dark, cool room, quiet room is the way to go. If you're sharing a bunk or you're in a dorm or you share a room at home, quiet may be hard to achieve. So earplugs or a white noise machine is a great way to kind of drown out the noise in the background. Creating a sleep routine is going to be really important. I like to talk to my athletes in a way that's like, you have a routine, you have a pre-game routine, you have a pre-practice routine. Why not have a sleep routine, right? That gets you in the mindset, right? Every other routine you have is getting you in the mindset to do something, preparing you to do something. So you need to do that, apply that same tactic to sleep, right? Do the same thing habitually, do the same thing every night before you go to bed, and it trains your body to now know, okay, I'm going to bed. So get them to start thinking about how that routine is going to look. And you can apply that to when you wake up in the morning too, having that morning routine. TV and phones in bed is usually just like a rule of thumb, no go. The blue light off of your phone can keep you up, and just looking and doom scrolling and all of that, just kind of stimulates your brain to keep going and keep thinking. So encouraging them to turn the TV off, maybe they have a meditation app instead, and get the phones out of bed. If you have a clock watcher, tell them to turn the clock. I don't really know if people have clocks anymore, alarm clocks, but if you do, if you have a clock on the wall, move it, cover it. If you're someone that's constantly looking to see what time it is, remove it, and you won't have to look at it anymore. Caffeine consumption can definitely play a role in your sleep. If you're consuming caffeine, caffeine can stay in the system for up to 12 hours. So keep that in mind, how much they're consuming, if they are consuming, and what time of day they're consuming that. Too much fluid before bed, right? If they're like they backload all their water to the end of the day, they're likely going to have to pee a couple times during the night, and that can be very disruptive in trying to re-fall asleep every time you have to get up to pee. So encouraging them to drink their water sporadically throughout the day. Don't just wait till the end of the day to chug 32 ounces of water. And napping can always be useful, but once again, the closer it is to bedtime, people find that it's much harder for them to fall asleep when it gets closer to nighttime. And as far as the categories of energy and mood, they do have a lot to do. They're very interconnected with stress and sleep. For example, why do babies cry? Because they're tired and they're probably hungry. So some things don't change as we get older. We get cranky and we get hangry. Those things apply to our mood and our energy. And so they're all very much interconnected. How well you sleep will affect your energy. How well you eat will affect your energy. How stressed you are will affect your mood and your energy. And then your mood can affect your energy, and your energy can affect your mood. So they're all very much interconnected. But what we can use this readiness tool for is to get to the root cause of the problem. Where is the problem starting? Is it starting from mood, or is it starting from energy? Which one is it starting on, so we can tackle that and not just mask it with trying to solve the other problems? Some take-home points, right? Use this feature as a tool to get to the root of the problem, right? That's the take-home point. Use this feature to understand how your athletes are feeling, how they're responding to a stimulus, and why they might be responding that way. Use these readiness scores, monitor them, encourage everybody to fill them out consistently and accurately and honestly. Follow up with conversations, follow up with maybe educational workshops. You may even have to educate parents. We as coaches, that's part of the evolution of coaching. You're not just coaching kids anymore, you're coaching parents, you're coaching families. And then really use this to make adjustments, right? We have this information, now do something about it, okay? Make the training adjustments, turn that week into an unload week, turn that week into an off week. A lot of us get kind of caught up in, like, I can't take away practice time. We have a game in 2 months. I can't possibly sacrifice practice time. in the grand scheme of things, that 2-hour practice when your team is already in the dumps and the slumps is probably not going to have that much of an impact on that performance. So give them the day off. The saying less is more is very real in this situation. Less can be more effective and more useful for their performance. So don't be afraid to make those training adjustments. And in fact, we encourage you to make those training adjustments according to this readiness feature. Let's open the floor. If you have questions, if you feel like sharing how you have utilized the feature, Volt teammates, feel free to chime in if you have something you want to say or add to what has already been spoken about.
No, that's cool. I was just going to say, I thought it was a really interesting point how you mentioned that you can take the opportunity to make, or take that kind of little pre-quiz as a learning opportunity for your athletes. So developing health education points around that. So if you are looking for something kind of a little bit extra, or a little bit different to do with your athletes, is, I don't know, those 10, 15-minute sort of PowerPoints or presentations on health education and how they interplay with their performance at the end of the day. If you're dealing with athletes or tactical athletes, in my situation, everyone kind of cares about the performance at the end of the road, and people kind of lose sight on the day-to-day stuff that gets you there. So yeah, I think that was really interesting. Really good point.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. There's an element to it that you don't want to get stuck in the mindset that trying to maintain the highest score possible is the be all end all. It's really just a response to the conditions that are going on. So you will get sore, you will get stressed, but it's looking at when those things get pinned in one direction or the other that we either want to decide about making intervention, or look at different ways of analyzing the training as it happens so it matches what our expectations are. If you're a coach and you know that there's supposed to be an easy session on this unload, but everyone's marking high soreness, something might be off there, be it just an understanding of how to do a movement, maybe something's going on, but it gives you opportunities to find interventions either in the times you expect there to be issues with stress, or at the points when there shouldn't be stress and you start seeing those.
Well, as always, feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any further questions, or you want to talk more specifically about your situation, whether it's about the readiness feature or anything else, Volt or performance related. My email is victoria@voltathletics.com. And any other support questions, you could always feed to support@voltathletics.com as well. So if anyone else does not have any questions or comments, we will wrap this up. And thanks for joining us. Sorry I didn't get to see and meet some of you that jumped in a little bit late. So I'm Victoria. And hopefully we will see you guys at our next office hours.